As a kid growing up here in Wisconsin in the 1970s, I got exposed to soccer pretty early on in my elementary school time when I was around 6 years old. And that was rather unusual for that era. Maybe not so much in a few parts of the United States, but it was definitely, a different thing than what had been going on in the Midwest up until that time. And the way that I wound up playing soccer and becoming, really into the sport and getting quite good at it was through chance. My dad had wanted to sign me up for Little League. We lived in what was called the township of Delafield. It was mostly empty country space, prairies and woods and things like that. And then the rather underdeveloped subdivision that we lived in, all of which had been farmers' fields at one time. And then there was the town of Delafield, which was about, maybe 4 or 5 miles away, probably 4 miles away from where we lived. And then there was the village of Wales, which was less than a mile from where we lived. So we lived on the border of Delafield and Wales. And in the town hall of Delafield, you could sign your kids up for sports for the summer, to keep them busy. And I think moms liked it because they would drop us off in the morning and then we were out of their hair until the afternoon. They had some alone time without kids while we sweated in the sun and did whatever we were going to do. So my dad takes me in there, and I actually remember this. I have some vague episodic memory of this. We go to sign me up, and there's this long list, right? And somebody asked, well, how old is this kid? And my dad said, you tell him. And I said, I'm 6. And they said, well, you can't play Little League. You have to be 7 to play Little League. Now, I am a August birthday, right? So I was always younger than the rest of the kids in my class because the cutoff was you had to be a certain age before school started. School started just after my birthday. And so I was just old enough to get into first grade and second grade. But during the summer, I was still that young age, whereas most of my classmates after first grade were, already 7. I was only 6. So my dad said, well, what do you mean he can't play? Well, they gave him some sort of runaround. And so then my dad didn't want to waste time and having made that drive. And so he was like, well, what can he play? And they said, well, there's soccer over there. You could sign him up for that. And that's what we did. So starting in June, after school let out, my mom would drop me off in the morning with a bag lunch and a thermos of water. And, I wore a white T-shirt because they told us all wear either white, red, green, or blue T-shirts. Those are the teams that you're going to be on. And I had a, undershirt like so many of the other kids. So she dropped me off there and, they lined us all up and they're like, okay, we got a lot of people wearing white shirts, not as many wearing the others. We're going to start doing some drills and teaching you about soccer. Don't use your hands unless you're the goalie and all this sort of stuff. And, we learned how to bonk it with our heads and do chest traps and how to kick back and forth with, how to dribble, right? And it was a lot of fun, right? And it turns out I was pretty good at that sort of stuff. And I wasn't that good at other sports, which were more typically American, right? Back at that time there were really 4 main sports, and we didn't have too much chance to play hockey, right? Because you need equipment for that. But there was baseball, and then there was football, and then there was basketball, and each had their season. And you'd play them in, a bit in gym class or out in the yard with other kids, and everybody had a glove. Just about everybody had a bat, and so we played a lot of games like that in the neighborhood. And, if you look at my glasses that I wear, you notice that the right lens is a lot thicker than the left lens. That's because even back then, this eye has always been, problematic. It's got an astigmatism that's really quite strong. My left eye is pretty good. And so I didn't know that I needed glasses at the time. I just knew I had terrible depth perception. So that made baseball kind of difficult. Every time I was putting my hand out to catch a ball, I wasn't quite sure if it was going to get there or not. Shooting baskets could be difficult as well, whereas doing layups, super easy for me, right? And football, catching passes, not so easy. Running with the ball, tackling people, that I could do. I was a skinny kid, really skinny kid. But I was pretty scrappy and tall. And as it turned out, soccer had everything I wanted to do. So they split us up for scrimmages into everybody wearing the white shirts and then everybody wearing the other shirts. We probably had like 30 people on each side, right? And I was one of the youngest kids in the mix. And they were like, well, just try not to get hurt. And they put me in the back, to be a fullback, what a lot of people call a defender. And, the ball starts coming with the other team coming down the field. And as it turned out, I was pretty good, even though I was like one of the youngest kids at taking the ball away from these other guys who were trying to score a goal on us. And I could kick the ball pretty far up the field. So some of the older kids were like, well, let this kid play, Here comes the forwards. Go to it, little Greg. Go take the ball away from them. And I loved it, I loved that like older kids were treating me as if I was part of the team. I loved being able to do it. I enjoyed the sheer physicality of it, Before long, I was learning how to like slide tackle and stuff like that. And I became a pretty good defender over that summer and over the next summer. And then we would sometimes, play soccer in the yard as well. Now, when I got to third grade, something really cool happened. The local, they started organizing all these local soccer teams for us kids. And Wales was, so close, and I actually went to Wales Elementary, so I became a Wales Dragon. Because the town was Welsh, that's why it was called Wales. And we had like a dragon, on our shirt, our jersey, and we started playing all these other teams. We'd have to travel to go to Heartland or Oconomowoc or Delafield or McWanago, or we could go down the list. I think there were like 8 teams in our league, and you'd have like a roster, and we were pretty good. We were actually a pretty strong team. We played with... and it's kind of interesting to think about this. Our formation was 5 guys up in the front as forwards, right? And then we had 3 halfbacks, and then there were just 2 of us defenders, and then the goalie. And our goalie was a guy who had only 1.5 arms. His one arm was cut off at the elbow. Some of the kids used to make fun of him on the other teams, not on our team. And then he would show them just how good he was, and they wouldn't score on this guy. And he could throw pretty far with that as well. Now, me and the other guy, as I mentioned, I was pretty tall, and I was pretty aggressive. By then I had like soccer cleats and stuff like that. I was very skinny, but I was, fast. And I also had another advantage. I would play on the left while this other guy who was bigger than me, a little bit, slower, but very powerful, played on the right as the defenders. So I'm not fully ambidextrous anymore, but at that time I was ambidextrous. I could play equally well with my right as I could with my left, and vice versa. I could do things with my hands more or less equally. They back then they didn't like you doing left-handed stuff, so they made me right with my right hand. But soccer I could do just as much with my left, including kicking and trapping and all the other things that go along with it. So I would play on the left, the weak side, and then he would play on the right, the strong side. And between the 2 of us and this goalie, 3 guys on defense, we would stop people short, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. My dad started getting into it because my sister, my youngest sister, who was 3 grades behind me, she started playing as well for like a junior team, and then he coached that team, and he had books about soccer, so I'd read his books and stuff. And now notice, we never got to see soccer like on TV or anything like that. That just wasn't on our radar. It was just a game that we played, and it was fun and cool. Then, some of the people have heard me talk about this before. I went to a school, University Lake School, where, it was like a college prep from 6 to grade 12, private, expensive. I got in on scholarship. My parents did that in part because the regular school system wanted to kick me up a grade, and Kettle Moraine was not very good at that time, so they found a way for me to get in, along with a couple other kids on scholarship. I think we were basically there to keep the test scores up because you were either really smart or you were really rich, and there wasn't a lot of overlap in that place. One thing that was really distinctive about ULS was that they took soccer seriously. So seriously that the gym teacher and soccer coach was a former Olympian, former U.S. team player, right? Mr. Heffernan. And soccer was what we did, basically, when we got to school, for gym class. Every gym class for the entire fall, until it got too cold to be outside, was soccer. And the girls were playing field hockey. That was their shtick as well. Nobody had a choice about it. You were on the soccer team, whether you liked it or not. And I loved it. I thought this was so awesome. We also would play soccer during our lunch periods. We'd scarf our food down and then go into the gym and play indoor soccer during the winter. We'd play outside when we weren't doing things like running around in the woods and getting sticks and trying to hit each other and calling it knights or other things along those lines, playing tag. So soccer was a big deal at University Lake School. So big that they didn't have a football team for their high school because they only had 20 people in a class, I think, And they would play another school, a public school, Arrowhead in Heartland, which had at least 10 times as many people to draw on for playing soccer. And there was this trophy ball that was on one side. Every year it would be repainted. It was green and white on one side, red and white on the other, because green and white was ULS and red and white was Arrowhead. And whichever side won got to paint in the other parts of the ball. And ULS would win more often, I think, than Arrowhead did. So that's what the bigger kids were doing. So, I played a lot of soccer. I really enjoyed it. We'd play it in our neighborhood as well. And then that kind of, that ended a bit playing on teams once I got to high school. And that was more of a factor of, our household being disorganized. Because I could have played when I went to Catholic Memorial. I could have been on the soccer team, but my mom didn't, sign me up for it. And I didn't know because nobody told me that I had to, show up to practices before the school year started. I kind of assumed I could just get on the soccer team, and then found out, nope, tryouts were back in July, and, so things were kind of a mess. And instead I would play soccer with, again, the kids in the neighborhood, or we would play it in gym class. Every spring we would spend weeks playing soccer. And then I was like, holy crap, this is the great time. Indoor hockey was fun too. I liked that, and track and field. But playing soccer was something that I just loved to do. And so, once again, I would usually play fullback, sometimes halfback, and just go at it, And not all the kids were quite as athletic. So, it was pretty easy to blow past them. I did actually break somebody's ankle my junior year, I think it was. We were both going for the ball at exactly the same time. We both wound up our legs to try to get to the ball quicker. We both kicked at the same time, and both of us hit on either side of the ball. It was such a collision. I actually thought my ankle was going to break. Instead, the shock of both of us hitting the ball, I flipped over the ball. I also heard this crack really loud. The other guy broke his ankle. Due to the force, and he had to be carried off the field and all of that. I don't even remember who it was. I was telling my wife about this the other day because we've been watching Ted Lasso and thinking about soccer and stuff like that. And then, so I didn't, play on the team. And then when I was in the Army, I was in Germany, and I enjoyed kicking the soccer ball around. We had our lieutenant try to organize a team, but not too many of the people were interested in it. And quite frankly, I didn't want to play with him after our first practice together, so I didn't do that. And then the last time I really did anything with soccer was my freshman year of college. I knew the guy who was coaching the soccer team because he was dating the French woman who lived in our foreign language suite. They knew that I spoke French, so they threw me into this French house. Her name was Cécile Revoltisseau, and his name was Rob Howe. And so he hung around a lot, and he found out that I liked playing soccer. So he's like, well, why don't you come join us? And so I did, and then he was like, oh, shit, why don't you become one of the trainers? And I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds fun. And I came down here to Milwaukee a couple times to play indoor soccer games with them. And I never ended up like playing on the team. I would just practice with the team, and he tried to get me on it, but I was kind of busy at the time. You know, I liked partying, I liked dating, I liked doing my other kinds of exercise, and you know that's books as well, right? So it didn't work out, but man, did I have a lot of fun with those guys. Probably half the soccer team was foreign students, and I enjoyed that as well. And since then, I appreciate soccer. It's fun to watch. I can't really play now because of my knees being screwed up. I'm missing 2 ligaments in one knee, and the other one's been compensated for too long. So I would hate to think about what would happen. But you know, when I had my kids, I tried to get them interested in it and kicked around the ball, but it didn't really take that much. But I've always retained a real love for the game, and I really enjoyed when I did get to play on teams. And so, as I mentioned, we've been watching this show, Ted Lasso, about an American coach who winds up being hired for a British soccer team, and watching all the stuff has brought back many of these memories for me. And so, you know, I thought maybe I would tell the story and some people would find it interesting or funny or enjoyable, and that's it. You know, I would love to be able to still play soccer because I remember how much fun it was. But I think I'll probably be stuck just watching from this point on.